I'd be fascinated to know on the quantitative side, I guess, more than qualitative. Uh, is your group or any groups you talk to talking about eye tracking software and things like neuromarketing? I've heard where they even put people in MRIs when they're watching movies, for instance, to see how they react, like how an audience is going to react. Do you guys do
Yeah, I
things
mean,
like that?
the eye tracking and all that stuff has been used. I just not, like when I was on Chrome, we used it. There, I think there were only 4 researchers for like 5 billion users. But we
Wow,
one guy.
that's a big ratio.
A little bit more, I think now, but would definitely use eye tracking, things like that. I don't think we ever did an MRI machine or fMRI or anything like that. I have to say, quantitatively, where I'm seeing things is just like big data and benchmarking and longitudinal studies, like really getting the ability to get a lot of data and being able to get it over time, and then to be able to like visualize the data, like really go in there and like have these computer programs and people who have a statistical background to be able to like go in there and find patterns and cluster things and that kind of thing. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
It's not anything that I do, but if I ever need to do anything like that, I talk to one of our quantitative folks or run something by, like I just had to create a scorecard to like figure out how smart certain products are. So I was like, can you look at this to make sure it's all right? So I see a lot of that, and just data science in general, and kind of finding insights and patterns from there. Quantitatively, the biggest thing that I think is just that it's more, there's more stakeholder buy-in. I think people are really wanting research and are excited about research, and are from the top level are saying this is important. That's a big deal. And then, yeah, we do have a lot of tools. I would say like the things that I'm also seeing just in the space, like in design, like a collaboration, as we were so remote now. I think things that incorporate collaboration or are cognizant of a collaboration being a part of that, like just looking at Sketch versus Figma, right? Like the fact that you can now have real-time collaboration on design documents and commenting like that, those sorts of things, I think you'll see in design, but I think it'll go across like the landscape of communication, productivity, all that stuff.
Very interesting. Oh, it doesn't. Oh, yeah. I'd be curious too. I mean, is there ever consideration that you deal with something, for instance, I think of it kind of like a Coke Pepsi thing, where are you guys talking about these new products and kind of things in a long-term educational sense, where you might say, oh, it won't be intuitive at first, but down the road, it's the best design or it's the best experience. And once people get used to it, it'll be better. Or is it more like, no, we need to make these things so they're instantly accessible? Kind of like, is it better to have a low floor or a high ceiling is what I'm getting at.
Each company and each team is going to have a different answer for what they prioritize, and what lens they kind of look through. Like if they're looking through a short-term lens to reach certain metrics, or they're looking through like if they're looking in terms of weeks or months or years, and that's going to have a big impact on what, in my opinion, success of a product is going to look like. And I think people to get a too short-term a view, whether it's pushing something out too quickly, not understanding it, or because the issue with like the educational or like your first run experience, you could lose people and that's it. Particularly if you're solving this feature, is solving a problem that they can solve in a different way, and they have confidence that they can solve it that other way, and maybe it's 2 more steps, and then your shortness in discovery, like you falling short in discovery or education, is going to be like a binary. It's like on or off. It's like off, I'm not trying it, and so I think that's a problem with if you have like, well, maybe eventually, somebody, but again, it's going to be different on every feature, what they're trying to go for.
I guess the size of the company too, because the bigger ones can afford to
Or
slowly
scrap
educate
it, yeah,
everyone.
yeah, or they can scrap it and restart again, or and they had to have more people. It's not like going to make or break. We scrap things all the time, and it's like the company, of course, is going to stay around, the next day. I have to
A/B
close this.
A/B testing seems like one of those unicorn things that a company can have, right? And of course, the analytics, data analytics would give a lot to that. But the ability for an organization to create two separate websites or apps or versions of it, at least the front face, and then get users to use it and then get discernible results from each of them to understand a direction. It seems like a unicorn thing because a startup or a new organization isn't going to have that many users in the first place. So those data sets aren't really going to be that powerful. Do you recommend anything for A/B testing for smaller organizations? And then how does that scale for a larger organization? Because it seems very powerful, right?
And it's been the first thought I had, and I'm not sure I'm going to answer a question on this. So, was a book that I read it's called Sprint, right? I think it was like the book, and it was about, you get 5 days from like design, like figuring out a product to designing it to coming up with a prototype, and every day was something different. And that was like the Google model. And you were user testing it on Friday. So there are ways of like really going and getting few people in a room, committing to a week, and getting really valuable insights that can steer a product. But for A/B testing, as a researcher, the designers do all that for me, and I tell them how high fidelity I need it or how low I think I can go. But like I said earlier, like you can get insights from a piece of paper and a chopstick. I've done that. I did an annotate, like how would you annotate? How would you proofread this document? And it was like showed people like what sort of things they wanted to do, where they thought that the tools would be, and stuff like that. So you can get info that way. And right now, where I'm seeing the prototyping design, where that's going is in Figma, because in Figma you really can do designs, keep a nice library of everything, but then connect things for a workable prototype, which before I'd have to have like the engineer make me something, and it would take a lot longer. Because it came to a point where like my manager was like, okay, everybody, no one is allowed to do any research. You can't recruit the participants, and that takes sometimes 1 to 2 weeks. You can't recruit the participants until the prototype is in your hand. Like that's how hard it was for us to get stuff. And it would be like the day before, like, come on, like I need to have this stuff. So, I don't know. So anything where the design is, and then can also just really seamlessly become a prototype. I can't remember if Sketch does. I don't think they do, but it's been a while since I've.
Yeah, there's tools for all of them.
Yeah.
Now, for the most part. A lot of them are built in. Like you're saying, Figma is built in. I haven't been using Sketch recently, but XD also, it's built in for those two. I think a lot of people would be really surprised at what problems are actually selected to get inquiry, right? For example, I had heard recently about Facebook groups, right? And that their goal is they have Facebook groups, but they don't actually want people to go and meet outside at those Facebook groups. Not to say they're totally against it, of course, but their goal is to have people using the Facebook app. So they'd rather push those type of tools within Facebook that keeps people using Facebook rather than saying, here's a group, go outside to use that, right? So when there's a usability question about Facebook groups, I would imagine that they're going to be focused on more usability tests for the efficiency of their app in getting users to use it more. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how you've seen these questions kind of filter through where it gets onto your plate, where you're making those decisions? Because as a kind of general thing, when you were talking earlier and you're like, these are the issues that people have. I bet a lot of people watching this are going to say, oh, well, they need to fix this, this, and this from Drive, right? For example, I actually have a friend who was working for Google, and they were sending messages to Drive saying these are the issues that weren't getting fixed, right? So how do those choices actually come down to you, where it's something that you're going to choose from? What are usually the qualities?
Well, the Facebook example is something that I think a lot of people deal with. It is important to them, and that's eyeballs on the screen. I saw that in Chrome, and that's a push. And that those sorts of things are going to be top-down mandates from whatever they're measuring their success by. And so they're going to, when it comes down to a researcher, it's like, what is keeping eyeballs on the screen and what is not keeping eyeballs on the screen? What is opening up? What are they using it for? Why, the time, the session time or whatever, those sorts of things. So it's really going to be whatever, like I said, that mandate is, and it could be like, you could have many. It's like the top down is revenue, new monthly average users or something like that, or weekly average users or something like it, or it's going to be reoccurring revenue. Like it's all these different things. And so like, if it's, like I said, it's eyeballs on the screen because of ads or because of other things, then it's like, okay, how do we maximize this engagement? If it's going to be revenue, it's like, okay, where are we going to find opportunities for more revenue? Like that means it's going to be new features and new products, upsells, that kind of thing. So then those sorts of questions will be asked of a researcher to look into those kinds of things. So that might be like usability on a new feature, or comprehension, or concept testing is another one. Like, oh, we have this concept of a new X, and then that's very, you barely even have a prototype. You might do participatory design, like what do you expect if you're, whatever, and have them draw out what they want. You could see like, oh, these features are important to people. So it's all kind of driven by what, like I said, this top down usually. But then also you get like, the reason I did accessibility research was because like this lead engineer was like, I don't think we're doing enough for people with learning disabilities in Chrome. And I'm like, I can help you with that. And because I'm really interested in underserved sort of segments. And so that, that's how that came about. And now, like I said, that was like a 3-month thing that it took a lot. It was expensive. So it really kind of matters. Like what, and again, for Facebook, it's eyeballs on the screen for ads, and it's scaling, it's all scale at any cost. So that's what's going to drive their research.
Are there any industry resources where somebody could look to understand some of those top-down mandates of like what they're looking for as far as success from larger organizations?
Because I don't think a ton of people share that stuff, but I think one thing that I think has served me well is like, I love to read, and like I read the paper. So like I read the business section. I don't read tech. I don't go super into it, but if you were interested in that stuff, like if you're knowledgeable about like this whole, like what's happening with TikTok and what's happening, that's where you're going to really start finding out why people make the decisions they make. And you'll start seeing these connections. And so I would say it's just like, read everything you can that's interesting to you. Like if it's like all the next gadgets, like you start reading Wired or whatever, like their emails or something, like you're going to get an idea of some like tech, trends and themes and ethical weird, things like that. Like, and so I would just say, keep your eyes open, talk to people, meet, chat with people, and ask a lot of questions.